It's 5 o'clock.
Good evening. At this time, we will reconvene the budget workshop. And tonight, we're going to be started on the revenue side. And I believe, Brian, you're going to introduce Anita.
Yeah, Anita's going to take the revenue side, and I'll pick up on the expenditure side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Brian. So we'll begin on page 29 of your book this evening. And just to speak just a moment about the format that we'll be going through. So this is a summary of the general fund revenues. And this top block at the top of page 29 is where we list our revenues by our major sources. And you can see for fiscal year 25-26, next year's budget, we are expecting total revenues to come in at just under $77 million, the $76,975,492. Now, beneath that is where we have more detailed information about those individual major fund sources at the top. So to start off, we'll start off with our major and our biggest revenue, which of course is our ad valorem taxes, our property taxes. And everybody knows that this was the big reval year for us. We did it on a 7-year cycle this time. We changed from an 8-year to a 7-year. Next time we'll do it after 6 years. So based on the results of that revaluation, the value that came in is $9,467,367,002. That's our new county value based on that revaluation. And then we have to make some assumptions to come up with the actual levy for that value. So what we are assuming is that we get to include 100% collection rate for motor vehicles, and Brian explained to you how that's done through the tax and tag program with the state, and so we can assume 100% collection on that. For all of our other real and personal and business personal property throughout the county, we have a 98.43% collection rate. So when you look at that $9.5 billion number for values, we're saying that of that, $8.8 billion is that personal and real property, and we multiply that by the calculated revenue neutral tax rate of 44.5 cents times our collection rate of 98.43% to get our estimated amount of $38,611,119. And then for motor vehicles, we have a value of $652.3 million. We divide that by 100, multiply it by the 0.44.5 cent revenue neutral tax rate to come up with a revenue estimate of $2.9 million for motor vehicles. And when you add those two together, you'll see we're expecting right at $41.5 million for the 2025 tax levy to be collected. Now, I talked a lot about the revenue neutral tax rate of 44.5 cents. I would like to go through, just take a couple minutes to go through the calculation of that, and that is going to be on page 33. So if you'll switch over to page 33 with me. So this is the template that is provided to all counties and municipalities by the Local Government Commission. This is what we are required to use to calculate our revenue neutral tax rate. And we're required to present that in our budget after revaluation. So the way this template works is if you look between the two lines there on the first half, you really start with your 2018 valuation of the $5.7 billion, and then for every year after your last valuation, your 2018 valuation, you pull your audited financials and you get the assessed valuation for every year after your last valuation. So you can see I did that for fiscal year 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24, and 25. And the reason you do that is because you want to be able to calculate the increase or decrease in your valuation from year to year so that you can see what percentage growth that you had for those years. And you can see we did that on that right-hand column. So for example, from 1920 to 2021, we had 3.303% growth. And then from 21-22, comparing that to 2021, we had 1.68. So that number is very important to calculate because when you calculate revenue neutral tax rate, it's not as simple as saying, I collected this amount of tax at 62.5 cents. What amount of tax will that same dollar amount will I collect at what rate? You can't do a ratio because of that growth percentage. So that's why we have to calculate that. So coming on down, you can see that our last tax rate was the 62.5 cents. That generated $41,177,671 for us. If you did a ratio to see what the exact equivalent rate we would need to bring that exact amount in, our revenue neutral rate would be 43.49 cents. But then again, that's not our true revenue neutral rate because we have to add in and factor in that growth during the last 7 years. And that is shown just below that in the 44.51 cent tax rate. So we actually had an increase from growth over the last 7 years of $960,780, and that was an average of 2.33% growth over the last 7 years. Are there any questions about how the revenue neutral tax rate's calculated and presented?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, well, let's head on back to page 30. So our second biggest revenue in the county is our sales tax, and I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. I think it accounts for about 18 or 20% of our revenue. But there are 4 articles of sales tax that we receive. They're Article 39, Article 40, Article 42, and 44. Now, there are certain restrictions on 2 of these articles, which are Article 40 and 42. These sales taxes were put in place primarily to assist counties in raising funds for school capital. So we are required to give the schools 30% of whatever revenue we collect for Article 40 sales tax. And it's even higher for Article 42. We're required to give 60% of our Article 42 sales tax to the school. So if you look over in the fiscal year 25-26 recommended column where we've estimated what our sales tax will be, of that almost 6.3 million, Article 39, we get to keep 100%. That's county sales tax. So of that 6.3 million, the county gets to keep all of that. But of that Article 40 sales tax, that 4,291,000, the county gets to keep about 3 million of that, and 1.3 million of that has to go to the schools for capital. Article 42, the 3.5 million, the county gets to keep about 1.4 million of that, and then 2.1 million of that has to go to the schools for capital.
I've got a question having to do with that.
Yes, sir.
We're using that money to pay off the school bonds, right?
I'll get to that in a minute, we use part of the lottery funds to pay off the school bonds,
Okay.
not the sales tax.
But we get more lottery money than we owe for school bonds, right?
No, we owe more for school bonds than we have for lottery money.
Okay, so,
Our distribution for lottery funds is about $480,000 a year. And our debt service this year on our bonds is about $1.5 million.
Okay, so where does the rest of the money come from to pay school bonds?
So I actually worked up a calculation this afternoon because we do have to look at the restricted sales tax plus the lottery proceeds to make sure we are giving the school that for capital. So when I took the 30% of Article 40, that's the $1.3 million we've got to give to the school. The Article 42 is $2.1 million going to the schools. There's $480,000 in lottery proceeds. That comes up to, you might want to write this number down, $3,876,652. So that money, in a sense, is restricted and has to go to the schools in
But that-
some manner. It can either be cash capital or debt service.
Okay, so how does that money flow through?
Okay,
To the
here,
schools.
okay. The way it flows through is the debt service on the schools is $1,629,326. The cash capital that we're recommending to the schools is $2,322,710. So when you look at the restricted article sales tax and the proceeds, you're at $3.876 million. And when you look at what we're sending to the schools, it's only $75,000 difference there. So I've demonstrated that all of the restricted revenue is either paying debt service for the schools or is being recommended to pay the schools in cash capital.
So we don't give that to them in addition to the 17 or 18 million dollars that we appropriate to the schools?
That's correct. It comes
Okay.
out of the restricted sales tax and lottery proceeds, except for $75,000. That's the difference. They're getting that in addition to the restricted amount. Okay, so back to, where were we? Okay, so I think that pretty much sums up everything on sales and other taxes, unless you have any questions about the other items listed there. I did want to mention on sales tax, that has been a real challenge for us to estimate sales tax over the last 4 or 5 years. It's been all over the place. I went back and ran some numbers, and during COVID, we experienced just incredible growth in our sales tax. In 2021, our sales tax grew 14%. In 2022, it was 9.8%. 2023, 7.3%. Now, 2024 is when we saw it come back to something very much more reasonable. It only grew 1.8%. But based on the projections for 2025, the current year that we're in now, I think we've completely plateaued with our sales tax. In fact, it might just slip just a hair. I think we're just going to come in about dead even with where we were at in 2024. So having said all that, trying to come up with a budget number for sales tax, we heavily relied on the guidance from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners and the North Carolina League of Municipalities. They have analysts that work on this that help us come up with estimates because it is such a big part of our budget. And they recommended that we budget 2.8%. So where it'll actually land, not sure, but we have built in a 2.8% growth factor for sales tax. Any questions about sales tax or other taxes and licenses? Okay, moving on down, our next revenue, and this is another big revenue for us, is our intergovernmental revenues. Now, these are restricted revenues from state and federal sources, primarily for DSS and health, for their operations there. You can see from the current year, federal and state grants did fall about $800,000. The current year, they were at 11.2 almost, and we're expecting them to be at about 10.7 next year. And when I went back and drilled down to see what that was, because I do rely on DSS and health to provide me with these estimates, it's primarily the medical assistance funding at DSS that's being decreased. And Lori's here. I'm sure she can speak to that if you'd like for her to. Lottery proceeds, you'll see a couple of lines down. That is the restricted money for the schools. We are currently using that to pay school debt. And then beneath that, this is something we'll talk about a little later when we go over special revenues and get to the fire and EMS districts. We are showing a $541,000 increase next year in those revenues, and that's because we are recommending to keep the EMS district tax at the 5-cent rate per 100 valuation, rather than reverting them to a revenue neutral rate. So what we've known for a long time and what's demonstrated later in your budget is that there's a very large subsidy that the general fund's providing for county EMS. And so we feel like, not that the fire and EMS districts should run like an enterprise fund, but we feel like they should be as self-supportive as possible. So we are recommending that we leave that tax rate in the EMS districts at 5 cents. Now, there is one district, the Long Acre District, that includes Pinetown and Broad Creek. They have requested that their rate be 3.75 cents. And they were historically at a 3.5 cent raise. So that is not an area where we have a truck that we keep any of the revenue. So I believe when Chris spoke to those fellows, they came to an agreement on what they felt like they could live off in their district to support their operations. And they settled at 3.75 cents for the Long Acre District. All the other districts, we're talking about Washington Township District, the Old Fort area, we're talking about Pantego Township, we're talking about the Bath Township, and remember, we have that truck at Blunt's Creek in the Chocowinity Township. So the county keeps all the revenue from the Bath, Washington, and Pantego Township because we provide the service there. And we keep a portion of that Chocowinity Township district tax for the Blunt's Creek truck. And that's where we're recommending the 5 cent rate remain in those districts. So that's the increase you see there, going from the $1,081,000 to the $1.6 million. Any questions about intergovernmental revenues before we move on? Okay, on page 31, license fees and other general fund revenues. Now, these are your non-tax revenue sources that we have, and for these services, basically we're trying to recoup our service costs from the actual users. So most of these pretty much stay the same, pretty consistent with the current year. The one I will point out is probably about 10 or 12 lines down, EMS rescue fees. This is where we actually bill a commercial insurance, Medicaid, Medicare for folks that the county transports. Okay, and we're estimating that that's going to go from 1.1 million to 1.3 million, and all of that increase is due to Medicare reimbursement rates increasing. If you go down just about 4 or 5 more lines, another big change for us is the miscellaneous health grants. We're going from $46,000 in the current year to $352,000, and that is because we expect to receive a behavioral health grant and a diabetes prevention grant next year. And as I said, other than that, everything remained pretty consistent with the current year there. Actually went up. We were at almost 3 million this year on our other fees, and next year we're projecting right at 3.8 million. Any questions there? Okay. Yeah.
The lease revenue, why is that went to zero?
Page 32. Which revenue now? Oh, you don't even need to worry about that. That's a year-end audit entry that don't mean nothing to us. That ain't actual money we get. So you did jump ahead a little bit. We're on page 32 now. Oh, which one are you talking about? I might be looking at the wrong thing. Oh, same thing. Audit entry at the end of the year. Nothing we need to, it's not actual cash coming into us. Okay, page 32. Investment earnings and transfers in, I thought you were talking about that lease financing shown there, the same thing there, audit entry, don't even need to worry about that. The main thing here is our investment earnings, so, you know, we do have a healthy fund balance. We're right at the target of a little bit over 35%. I believe I'm projecting 35.7%. So that does allow us to enjoy interest earnings when there are any kind of interest rates. So we expect to have interest earnings of about $2.5 million on our idle cash sitting in our investment accounts. I'm going to take you back, we're almost done, to page 29, right quick at the top. The bottom two, the administrative charges from other funds and appropriated fund balance. So Brian spoke about this in his message Monday night, but those administrative charges from other funds, that is where the water and solid waste fund is paying back a portion to the general fund for work that employees that work for the general fund perform for those enterprise funds. And a good example of that is my time and Brian's time. You know, we spend a lot of time managing or helping manage water and solid waste. So you've got HR, you've got the manager's office, finance, we pay all their bills for them. The tax assessor, they mail out the solid waste bills as part of the tax bill. So we try to recoup some of those general fund charges and costs back from the water and solid waste fund. And they're going to amount to about $450,000 next year. And if you're interested in seeing how we calculate that, there is a schedule in the back under the appendix. It's on page 345. We do have a basis that we use for every department. For example, HR, we use number of employees. Finance, we use number of bills paid, things like that. You can delve into that all you like. And then finally, for appropriated fund balance, we do have a small amount of appropriated fund balance recommended for next year. It's $166,298. And that is where we received a grant from Vidant for community paramedicine in the current year. And we just got that paramedic up and running back in February or March. So they gave us $196,000, and we're not going to incur $196,000 worth of expenses at June 30th. We're going to have about $166,000 left on that grant for next year. So that's why you see that fund balance appropriated. It's to pay that paramedic, to allow for some equipment purchases for that position, some other equipment purchases that she has, and some professional development, I believe. So I'm going to direct you to page 35. That is where we look in depth at fund balance appropriated, just so you can see where we're at compared to your policy. And you can see I already mentioned that I'm estimating at the end of the year that we'll be right where we need to be. Your target is 35%, and I'm estimating that we'll be at 35.7%, which is $26.7 million in unassigned fund balance. Any questions about fund balance or anything else I've gone over with revenues? You can see, if you look down, you know, a few years during COVID, you see how our fund balance went up. We were at June 2020, which would have been the year COVID started. We were right at our target at 34.83%. Well, you know, the federal government just flooded counties. I'm not complaining, but they just gave us all kinds of money. The health department was getting all kinds of COVID funding, and it was supplanting the county dollars. DSS, the same thing. And even general services for general government, the ARPA funding. So that's why our fund balance percentage went so high in the 40s, mid 45% in 22, 23 because of those COVID funds. And then you'll remember in 2024, the reason it dropped so significantly is because we earmarked the $10 million cash for the match for the new school, new Eastern Elementary School. So that took us right back to where we needed to be at our 35%. That's all I have for revenues, unless you have any questions.
Any questions of Anita? All right,
Here's what I found.
Brian, are you up?
Yes, sir. So I'm going to start on page 37 with the long sheet. This is the one that's in your book. You're going to have to take it out because it's folded over. So this is our roll-up of
37.
page 37, the long sheet. You might want to pull it out so you got so these are the general fund expenditures. The department heads are here tonight. If you have any questions that we're not able to answer as we drill, if you want to drill down into any of these. So typically the way we do this, you see on the left, the general fund departments. Across the top, the 24 actuals, what was budgeted originally in 24-25, what the budget was as of 2/10/25. We always do a mid-year look. Then what we project to close the year out, what was requested by the department, what was recommended in the budget, and then ultimately what you approve as the Board of Commissioners for fiscal year 25-26. We also give you a column which compares original 25-26 to original 24-25, the recommended, so what we're recommending to what you originally did in last fiscal year. We always look at apples to apples. You'll see some budgets look at amended to recommended, which is really not a fair look because you want to look where you started because you're starting again this year. And then we show on the right side that percentage change. We normally don't go into much detail unless it's plus or minus 5%, but we have to go through these. You also have in your books, so if you start, we'll just start with the governing body, which is you guys. You'll see how that runs across the top, and then if you look on page 43, it correlates with the description of the department. You'll see the roll-up on page 43 where it shows personnel benefits, operating capital. That's the way we always show the roll-up, and we'll show actuals. Then we'll show originals, amended, and recommended. And then on page, the next page, on page 44, is the line item detail. So for every one of these lines, you have a corresponding section in your book that talks about what that department does. It'll give the contact information. It'll show an org chart. It'll give you the roll-up. And then on the next page, it'll give you the line item by line item. And again, it goes, we take you all the way back to 22. Actuals, and we go 22 actuals, 23, 24, and then we show 25, and so you've got all that to look back, so you can look back 5 years. So each of those provides that information. We roll it up in a big sheet for you, so it's fairly easy. You'll see under governing body, it was up $5,000. That's predominantly, if you look on page 44, you'll see that that all of that essentially is board salary because of the 3% COLA that's built in. So nothing unusual there except for, we took one line item down by 500 and took another one up by 500. So all of it was essentially built into salary. Any questions? And I don't really know how you want to do this, Mr. Chairman. I guess we can hit each of them, and if there are any questions, otherwise we'll move on.
I would say let's just turn the pages, and
Okay.
if you have a question that you want to ask, speak up.
Okay. So moving on to county administration, that's up 4.9%, $34,000. The majority of that is in salaries and benefits. Again, that 3% COLA, not seeing anything that's, the majority of those are flat besides that. Any questions? And the majority of these, when we put in a 3% COLA, is going to adjust that. That's why it's plus or minus 5. We don't really get in a whole lot of detail. That's where you'll see that. So under finance office, they're up $34,000 or 4.2%. Again, the majority of that is in salary and benefits, plus hospitalization. So any questions on finance as you go, as you look at that one? That's on page 48.
Brian, I'm, back up.
Yes, sir.
And I only checked this on the county administration, and
Okay.
you just need to tell me if that's pretty much what everybody else is up.
Okay, tell me.
The hospital insurance up 5%?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, even 5%.
Yes, that's an estimate. We don't know because our plan year is on a January 1 to December 31st schedule year. Of course, our budget's a July 1 to June 30th. So when we're budgeting, we do not know what our insurance is going to go up. Now, we do know what it's going to be July 1 through December 31st because the rate we got right now is what it's going to be. But we don't know what our rate will be January 1. So I estimated 5%.
Yeah, that's really unusual. It's kind of weird that when you think about it, because we use the state health plan. The state health plan is on the fiscal year July 1 to June 30th, just like we are, but their health plan renewals are on a calendar year. So, I mean, I don't know why the state's not doing it on the fiscal year like they ought to, but we're at their mercy on that.
Okay, and the second one is right above that, the local government employee retirement fund.
Yes, sir.
That's up 10.8%.
The retirement, yep.
The retirement part.
Yeah, so as you recall, I was talking about that with the local government retirement system. The LGC or the state treasurer's office sets those rates, and they have recently, I think I'm not sure whether we did a presentation, but we talked about it. The prior treasurer, and you probably heard a lot of this discussion during the election for treasurer between the two treasurer candidates. Both of them recognized that there were some deficiencies in the management of the retirement system, both on the state employees retirement side and the local government retirement side. And those deficiencies were that the current or the prior treasurer kept a lot of money in cash instead of investing it, which impacted the returns on the system. I mean, they have billions of dollars in that system. So they're currently working, and I know the new treasurer, we've actually had some conversations with him. I sit on the retirement committee for the North Carolina City County Managers Association. We actually commissioned a study ourselves through our dues money to have an actuary look at some of that and compare the state of North Carolina system to other systems across the United States with similar numbers. And what they saw was that we lost. We did not. You could have put money in a mutual fund in the stock market and done better than the state did. So unfortunately, it was a little too conservative, kept too much in cash. The new treasurer, I think, is going to do a little different. So what they did in order to try to fix, and as you know, they talk about how well funded the system is. Now, North Carolina's system, both the state retirement system and the local government retirement system and the judicial retirement system, they are really funded really well. They're not funded at 100%, but they don't need to be funded at 100%. I mean, if everybody retired tomorrow, then yeah, they might need to be funded at 100%, but that's not going to happen. So they look at that and they look at a 30-year horizon. Well, if you also remember, the former state treasurer came in and reworked the unemployment insurance. You know, when we had issue where the unemployment insurance fund fell off, and then he came in and essentially reworked everything and aggressively went after that and fixed it from a financial standpoint. But they did it very, very aggressively. And if you were a business, your unemployment insurance rates went out the roof until they got that back. And I think everybody was pretty clear with him about it. I mean, I know we've said it to him. The situation where the state has or not necessarily arbitrarily, they overestimated what kind of returns they were going to get on the system. And I think one of the gentlemen said, when you were in Harlan Boyles's years, where interest rates were 8%, 9% consistently, it was easy to return 5%, 6% on your money. But rates got really tight, and of course, they dropped and they went really low. So they were overestimating their returns, and of course, when they overestimate their returns, the amount that the system is funded is reduced. Now, it's still funded in the low 90s. It's funded 92, 94%, which is really good. But the former state treasurer wanted to go after that, and he wanted that to happen really quickly, that funding level get back up. And was a bit aggressive. And that's one of the things that we expressed as our committee to the state treasurer's office was, it didn't get in this situation overnight. It didn't go from 95, 96% funded to 92, 93% funded overnight. You don't have to fix it overnight either. And I think the new state treasurer agrees with that. And also, so when the reason that number is up, the contribution, is because that was a plan that the former treasurer put in to try to bump that up to help it get more fully funded. Those numbers are going to turn down a little bit based on what the new treasurer we believe is going to do, based on the actuarial studies. They're going to lengthen out the time frame in which they return those funds. They're going to look at some other things that were just a bit too aggressive, as well as keeping not as much money in cash and getting better returns out of the system. So I think we've got maybe one more year, and then you'll see it turn down, and those contributions will get a lot better. So, but yes, it was a long comment but I think we've talked about that. I just want to make sure everybody was still up on it.
But we really have no control over that or the hospitalization.
No, sir.
There's two numbers.
Unless you really want to pay a really huge bill.
You don't want to get out. You don't want to get out of the health insurance
Right.
part.
Okay, so finance. I think we were through finance. Any questions on finance? If not, I'll move on to human resources. So human resources was at 3.9%, $12,000. Again, that's mostly salaries and benefits. Adjustments there, health insurance, retirement contributions, and 3% COLA. Any questions under that one?
We're good.
Okay. Tax assessor was at 3.5. That is on page 52. Generally the same thing. Again, unless we call it out, the majority of those are based on salary benefits in driving those numbers below either between 0 and 5%. Any questions on assessor?
I think we're good.
Okay. The collector's office is down 18,000. They are up a little bit, but you'll see where we reduced some. Let's look. So in general, the majority of that is for DMV collection fees. We went from 145 to 110. So there's about $30,000 there. And those are numbers that we end up paying for that collection that we don't think we will this baseball thing. Did you want the rates? Do you want the retirement rates?
No,
Okay.
that's okay. You guys go too deep when we go there.
All right, so any questions on collector? All right.
Everybody good?
Court facilities is down slightly, $1,940. This is where we have jury commission, where they provide the software for the jury to pick juries. We have money for courthouse operations, for utilities in the courthouse, repair and maintenance in the courthouse, and then the contract services, the 17510, is for Allied Universal that provides the security, the unarmed security at the courthouse and to supplement the sheriff's office. So that was, you see that was down a little bit.
I'm assuming the utilities of 125,000 includes the utilities for the detention center.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, moving on to Board of Elections. So they're flat at 0.1%, $664. Again, for that, for any questions there? Kelly's here, she wants to. And I guess I can go ahead and say that now, unless y'all got some questions. As we get through the departments, I guess they can leave as they, okay.
Well, I'd like for them to stay, just smile.
So any questions?
No,
on elections?
you can leave.
So Kelly, you're good. Lloyd, you're good. Wayne, you're good.
Well, is everybody good with that?
Absolutely. Quick question.
Yes.
So this does not count for any of the expansion stuff in the back?
It does not. So the expansion is in the back. Now, this one does include municipal elections because you got municipal elections this round, but anything that is new or different or above what we originally had for continuation is in the back under expansion. You got that list, and we'll actually go through that a week from tonight. I think it's a week from tonight, and we'll have all the departments in first, and then the outside agency will come in and they'll talk about them. Thank you.
You're excused.
All right, so register of deeds is the next one. That's 3%. Again, we're right on where it is there. Facilities maintenance. I'm sorry, any questions on that one? Facilities maintenance is on page 62. We're at 2.2% or $34,000. Again, the majority of that is salary and benefits. Next is debt service. So we come slightly down on our debt service, and Anita probably wants to talk to you about debt service, because this is really, again, this is another one of the things we're really proud of, and you know, we've refinanced debt, we have debt, we do have debt, and it's okay to have debt, especially when you have debt at 1.17% and 1.23% on your school bonds. We had opportunities to refinance those several years ago and drive those rates down. So you'll see on page 64 where we have our outstanding debt, our general obligation debt, and our general fund debt, not necessarily general obligation. We only have 2 GO bonds. Those are school bonds. But we have the energy contract, we have the USDA installment purchase, which is the health building, the new health building. I say new, it's been there a while, at the community college. Then we have major capital that we used several years ago. We borrowed from ourselves some money, and we're paying ourselves back at an interest rate. And then you have the 2 school GO bonds that were refinanced. And you'll see that we have, I mean, in 28, 29, it steps all the way down. I mean, you will be done with your GO bonds at the end of fiscal year 28. You'll have no school bond debt. And you'll have a brand new elementary school, and you'll have 0 school debt. That's pretty incredible.
What happens to the debt service? Is that restricted?
So the funds are restricted. I mean, you've got to use your restricted sales tax for capital,
Okay.
for the schools, for capital or for debt service. So there'll be more money after that goes away. There'll be more money pushed to the schools for capital.
For capital.
Right. So, and then on page 65, you'll see when the debt was issued, when the final date is, what it is, and then the type and what the interest rate is. So I think, you know, just to toot finance horn for a minute. I mean, they've just done an absolutely fantastic job of managing our debt and staying on top of that. I mean, and again, it's okay to have debt, especially when you can have debt when it's at 1.17%. So they've done a really excellent job of doing that.
On the school bonds,
Yes, sir.
the total, I mean, roughly about $4 million that'll be wiped out clean.
Correct. Yes, sir. So you'll in 2027, at the end of 2027, you'll have no debt. You'll have paid off all your school bond series 2021B, and then the next year in 28, you'll have paid off the last one, which is the 2021A. Those two.
That frees up over $1.6 million.
It does for capital. Yes, sir. For capital, for school capital. So you have to think about it, you have lottery funds still coming, and you've got the restricted capital. So there'll be a significant amount of money to be able to go to the schools for capital. But again, there are not many counties in North Carolina that have that small amount of debt. There really aren't. So,
And the installment purchase, that was David Francisco's office.
no, so we've already paid that one off. The installment purchase.
Yeah, well, I
Oh,
mean-
sorry. Yeah, the 117 West 3rd Street, yes, sir.
That's
That was that.
paid off.
And you were restricted, when that deal was done, however many years ago, when that was acquired, there was a restriction on that deed that you couldn't pay it off for a certain number of years. And once we got to that point, we went ahead and paid it off.
I
So
think,
we paid it off
if I
last year.
remember, I think it was 10 years.
Yeah. So that's your debt service, and that debt service steps down every year. So unless you get back in the debt game. And still, I mean, if you think about it, for those who've been around for a while, 4 and 5 and 6% interest rates ain't bad. You know, they're not 14% like they were many years ago. The challenge is we've got a generation that's never seen any debt, any interest rates less than, you know, they've only seen things that are less than 3%, 3.5%, 4%. So they're like, oh my God, it's crazy. You have 6% interest rate.
They don't remember the 1980s.
When I tell my kids that when we finished building our house and termed it out, it was 16.5% was the best fixed rate we could get. They looked at me like, you're on something, aren't you?
Right.
That's true.
So then we move on to non-departmental. These are items, line items that essentially apply to the entire county. We try to put items, or each department has their own specific items, and then ones that reach across the entire county, we do under a non-departmental. It's just easier for us to account for that. And you see on page 67 what those are made up of, things like postage, telephone, the employee luncheon that y'all do, the EAP program, things like that. Our total IT and software support, because that's overall with the entire county, our insurance and bonds, and those kind of things. So we're up $177,000 or 19%, and that's because we've had a 9% increase in our insurance rates and some increases on our IT costs. So, yeah, I think y'all know the association. We're insured through the Association of County Commissioners, both for workers' comp and for our property casualty. The workers' comp, a couple years ago, we worked with the board, and we have a high deductible workers' comp on that. It's $100,000 is the deductible on workers' comp, and then we started, so that helped us decrease our premium amount tremendously, and every bit of that money we saved in premium, we pushed over to a workers' comp reserve fund to help build that up, so we could essentially be self-insured on that piece. We continue to maintain that $100,000 deductible, and this year we're at a point where we're not recommending you transfer any more money to the workers' comp fund, because I think it's at
We're at 1.2 million reserve there, and we think
Yep.
that's sufficient amount.
Super.
1.2 million reserve. So it's about managing your money and taking advantage of those opportunities. And then, of course, the association is doing some things under property casualty. In fact, I had lunch today with Michael Kelly, who used to be the director. He's still doing some work for them. But they've seen, and they're taking some actions to try to help people be more responsible for things like single vehicle accidents. You no longer get away with single vehicle accidents. It's a $5,000 deductible, and if it's a single vehicle accident, then it's at least $5,000 deductible or 1.5 times your whatever deductible you had. So, what they were seeing was folks backing into stuff and folks doing this and doing that, single vehicle, you just can't allow that to continue. You got to take some responsibility and start making it hurt people in the pocketbook before they start doing right. And that's across the entire state. So, and of course, they're still having a challenge. As you well know, I mean, I don't know if anybody else's insurance has played some games. The good thing about being in North Carolina is they're not allowed to play those kind of games. State insurance commissioner is able to control the majority of that. But all the insurance casualty claims that have come in, whether it be the floods, the hurricanes, the fires across the United States, really tough on the insurance industry. And of course, they're there to make money. So they're raising their premiums. And in the reinsurance market, which everybody has to go to the reinsurance market because nobody can hold that much liability, is being consolidated because there are a lot of folks who've gotten out of the reinsurance market because they just, I guess you get burned on that and you get out of it. So what we understood from the association, like the Lords of London, who are the big reinsurers, they're down to 4 or 5 of them around the entire world who still do reinsurance. So that obviously drives the price up. So insurance is a challenge for us. We're lucky in that we have a good safety program, and our folks work hard to make sure that people go home the way they came to work in the morning. I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's financially a good thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for our employees. And we see benefits from that. So we'll continue to work hard on that. Jennifer does a really good job in working with our departments and helping them understand what needs to be done. And sometimes things may take a little longer to get completed, but that's okay as long as everybody goes home the way they came to work that morning. Everybody has all their fingers and toes and those good things. So,
Brian, when you look at the IT number, that's a pretty big jump. A few years ago, we talked about employing a IT specialist. Can an IT specialist take responsibility for some of that expense, or is that?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. So our contract for a lot of that is for software. We have like our Munis software, our financial software, all of our endpoint protection that we have on our system, our network protection. We've got some additional upgrades for storage because of the number of additional cameras that have gone into the system. Our contract that we've had with our current provider is I think right at $100,000 a year, which we get really good service from them, and we're very pleased with how that is. So you couldn't afford to hire an individual IT person for that. You just couldn't. IT folks are mid 100s to 200s.
Yeah, you've answered my question.
It's incredible. I mean, they do it. They're well paid for what they do because it's a brutal world out there, and we're getting attacked every day by folks trying to get in our systems. Let's see, where are we?
On
Transfer.
the transfers.
Yep, so we're transfer there is $153,000. That is on page 71. And the reason, I'm sorry, 59. 69. I jumped too quick. Transfer of other funds. The reason that is you remember we transferred, the board said you had set a policy a couple years ago to transfer 1 penny of revenue from the tax rate to the capital reserve fund for facilities. And that 1 penny now is estimated at $931,873, where before it was $575 or so.
$640.
$640, okay. It is $640, okay. My bad. I should read the spreadsheet. So that's the main driver on that one.
And the other change is the revaluation. We've gone from a 7-year amortization on adding to it to a 6-year.
Correct.
Let's bump that up.
Correct.
That's correct. All right, and then contingency is flat at $25,000. It's on page 71. All right. moves us into human services, our human services category, Department of Social Services. So, social services is essentially flat at $81,000 out of a $14 million budget. They're up $81,000, 0.6%. Any specifics you may have about DSS, you have correct. They also are reducing, as you remember in the budget message, they have reduced 2 full-time equivalent positions. They were income maintenance worker positions that they received, that the board approved in prior year as a search expansion, and they have evaluated those positions and are good with letting 2 of those positions go. They're not, we won't be sending anybody home, they're not filled. So, or anything else there?
Everybody good?
Any other questions? All right. All right, so your next one is the Health Department, and that's where you see the increase, 8.3, for somebody's school. 440,000, and that's 8.3% increase, but that is that behavioral health cost-up grant that they received. And that is on page 85. The detail starts on page 85. And again, they have a pretty substantial budget as well. And a lot of those, you have to remember, both with DSS and with health, a lot of those programs are cost share programs where we pay a little bit and the state pays the majority, or the federal government pays the majority of it, and we get reimbursed for it. But that's the main piece, that behavioral health cost-up grant. Veteran Services is down slightly at 3.1%. And that's just where, what do we do on that one? The benefit number went down just a little bit.
Oh, the retiree.
That's right. So Karen, who was our former Veteran Service Officer, was a county employee who retired with 30 years of service. And that's why you see the benefit number going down from 26 to 22. So when she retired, the county picked up her health insurance until she qualified for Medicare, which is what you do for your policy is for employees who meet that criteria. So she rolled off this year and was eligible for Medicare, so you stopped picking her up. That's why that decrease. Area mental health and transportation. This is where we fund Beaufort Area Transit, the developmental center. We get elderly and handicap money from the state. We get the rural NC DOT rural grant, the alcohol treatment, Trillium, and criminal justice passages. That is a reentry program that the state has. So those are down slightly, and that decrease was in what we project from the EdTap, or the elderly and handicapped transportation. We don't necessarily know what those will be until we get them from the state, so we estimate them, and but it's money in, money out, so it really doesn't matter if it was $5 or if it was $100,000. It's
That's right.
money in, money out. So
Where did you find the actuals in the county portion?
under BATS, so the actual,
The 193,750.
193.7.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The top number's what the county contributes to BATS.
Okay.
Everything else that flows through us is grant related for them, just an in and out like the manager said.
There's no increase there.
no, sir. They didn't request it. Yes, sir. So on to community services, and we start with corporate extension. That's up 28,000 or 8.2. I think we missed on the operating side, right, last year.
The personnel costs.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a bad budget number for cooperative extension for their personnel contract in the current year.
You can look under the 25 original budget. We estimated 286,886, and we should have estimated the projected of 302,404. So because we missed the number this year, it looks like there's a huge increase when there's really not.
It's not that Rod got that big of a pay increase.
That's right.
Any questions on that one? And y'all know we have that agreement with NC State where we have a contract with them to provide those services.
And I guess that's, the new tractor would be under capital.
All right, soil and water conservation, 3.4% or $7,000 on a $215,000 budget. Again, personnel. I think it's $400 on operating is the increase. Any questions there? Youth Services on page 113, this is Pamela Copals, Boys and Girls Club, the Bellhaven After School Program, and the Community-Based Alternative, that's JCPC. You do have a request from the Bellhaven Community After School for a service expansion. We just got that recently, and Anita will get that in the book. They actually asked for 20. We are recommending $13,334, which is what you gave them last year. They're requesting 20, so the difference in that you'll see when we talk about service expansions next Thursday. So just want to put that on your screen because I know there was a question.
When did we, Mr. Manager, when did we, make that permanent, that they get that percentage, that 13,000? I don't remember last year.
It was, I'm sorry? It was later in the fiscal year because we held
How
up.
about let me talk to the manager?
Yeah, we held up on it a little later, waiting for the board
To
decide what
when
you
it was
wanted to
closing.
do. Yeah.
Okay.
So we held up on the Boys and Girls Club, and then, because that's what finally was put in last year, we continued that.
Okay.
So,
And at the time we did it, it was based on the number of children
It was.
that both were doing.
yes, sir.
So that's why it came up to the odd dollars.
Yes, sir.
I think it was 1/3, 2/3 is what we settled on.
So then you move to outside agencies, and of course, you're going to move on down to, so outside agency starts on 127. The detail is on page 128. That's down 12% or $73,000 because y'all did some one-time funding of outside agencies last year. And of course, we don't put the one-time funding back in there. We put whatever you had in. And like if you go back and look at last year's or this current fiscal year's final budget message that I write, after you go through this process, it'll read in there, one-time funding for this at this amount, or continuation or additional continuation funding of this amount, and then that would go back in. But there was roughly, there was $73,000 in one-time funding in the previous year. So that's why that's not repeated. So economic development on page 129, the detail on page 130. There was some reduction in personnel costs there, so that's why you see that decrease. That's essentially all that was. Planning on page 131, and then the detail on page 132. We increased the cost. We adjusted the contract amount that we have for planning services with the Mideast Commission slightly. So there's a slight $6,000 increase, 1.6%. And that takes us through where we plan to go tonight, because I'm already at education. So we plan to pick up on Tuesday night if you're on page 1 for the table of contents, we'll pick up Tuesday night with education. The superintendent will be here, the president of community college will be here, and then we'll go through public safety and do our special revenues and our enterprise funds. That's on Tuesday of next week, and then Thursday of next week is service expansions, And then the next Tuesday is your final meeting to get together and decide what it is you want to do, what you don't want to do to the budget. So from that perspective, if you want to delve into any additional information, from page 3 in the budget book all the way to page 131 in the budget book, we're happy to answer that. Otherwise, we'll start Thursday with education, but here to answer whatever. Oh, Tuesday, that's right, I'm sorry, today is Thursday. Tuesday, at 5 o'clock. So
Well-
any additional questions? Want to make sure y'all have all the information you need.
Hey, this goes back to the STEM Center. Get me straight, because I'm a little bit confused.
STEM
The STEM building at the airport now is being leased by the college.
Correct. That's my understanding, yes. They're doing their aeronautical work out there for drones and airplane pilot
So
licenses.
is the STEM, is there still a STEM organization meetings? Where did they go?
Now that I don't know. I think they may still be using a little piece of that, but they're actually building, they got some funding, I think, from Representative Kidwell, and they're going to build a building. It's my understanding there was a groundbreaking out there at the airport, out there, what we used to call the old drop zone.
So they're still going to require annual funding? Okay.
Yes, so they're in your outside agency as a continuation. Let's see where we have them. Oh, I'm not at that page. Have you got that page?
I can be, just a second.
Hang on, let's get there real quick.
Services.
It's 5,000 is what?
5,000.
Yeah,
Frank
yeah.
beat us to it.
Well, due to the fact that two of our commissioners are not here now, I would suggest that we stop and recess, and we come back on Tuesday night.
Well, and that's what we set it up with the schools to be here on Tuesday. So, I mean, we told everybody because typically what we do is we work through that first half through community services on the first night, and then we work through the rest of it on the second night. So they'll be here and are prepared for that on Tuesday. So, but if there's anything that we've gone through so far that you need additional information on, please let us know.
I won't be here Tuesday.
You won't be here on Tuesday. Well, I know we have a few people that are interested in a game called hockey. It's being played. So this will allow those people to, are you into that, Rod? You're not, okay. I know our clerk is.
Going to a boxing match and hockey game breaks out.
Okay, well, we'll recess until 5 o'clock on Tuesday night. Thank you very much.